Hi, I'm Mike Totta.
And I'm Ben Totta, and we're here today in our shop, and we've got several examples out here of different types of wood finishes that you might use on your wood floor, and we're just going to talk about the different types and why you might use them in different scenarios.
All right, the first category is the most common we use. Most of the floors we work with are already existing floors. People have red or white oak flooring in their home already that we may be adding to and then customizing color and sheen. In those cases, we have used a stain. There's a gallery of stain here. If you have us do an in-home consultation with you, this is our leave behind, which as you can see, oak and a lot of the domestic species are very versatile in terms of the colors that you can achieve with them with just simple wood stains. And then we're going to top that with a commercial grade water-based polyurethane that's going to be available in 4 sheen levels: flat, satin, semi-gloss, or gloss. This is the most common category of finish for us because number one, it's environmentally friendly. All of these finish coats dry in 3 hours or less and are Green Guard Air certified. Just a fancy way of saying chemical emissions are low enough, dissipate quickly enough, not considered harmful for you to inhabit the home while we work. It's also very durable. So a 2-component means it's got a part A and a part B that mix together. It's a chemical reaction, but it forms a harder, more scratch resistant, chemical resistant bond with the wood. So it gives you kind of like the best of both worlds with environmentally friendliness and durability. It's also a floor finish that you're going to be able to live on for 10, 15 years, clean, not do anything with, and can stay looking good for a really long period of time, you know, relative to how well you care for it. So in this type, couple samples here, we're just showing white oaks with a stain, a light gray stain, and then this one shows like a spectrum of different stains we're showing somebody, but you can get a lot of different colors. And then this is a satin or a flat sheen, and then a semi-gloss or gloss sheen. You can dial in how shiny you want the floor. So there's a lot of options. In this case, it's our most common everyday kind of workhorse system, and can really achieve most looks that people want with that.
So moving on from there, we're going to get into the raw wood look that has become really popular in recent years. So this finish system that we've used on these boards, and we've got an example shown here of hickory finished that way, and red oak, and then white oak. These finish systems are designed to maintain as much as the natural raw wood that look has when it's just got no finish on it. So a traditional like natural finished look is this right here. So that's just got a sealer and a finish on it. It gives the wood a little bit more of a like rich, wet looking tone, which adds a little bit of coloration to it, as opposed to like, if you look at the backside, that's the raw wood. So these types of finishes are trying to maintain that look as closely as possible, and that's what we do on these. So the finish system that we use for this is also a 2-component water base. So chemically and functionally as it performs, it performs very similarly to our standard finish, and it goes down in a similar type of schedule in terms of multiple coats. They each take about the same time, 2 to 3 hours to dry. One thing that these often come in though is a really low to trying to achieve almost no sheen, so that it does look like raw wood. Although if someone really wants this color but they want a little bit of sheen, we can coat over this with a higher sheen for the final coat to achieve the color but also give it some sheen. So that's the natural raw wood look that we do a lot. So durability can mean a lot of things, but this floor isn't necessarily more durable than this one, but with the low sheen that it achieves, it can be more forgiving in what shows on your floor, because when you scratch this, it is not reflecting as much light back to your eye, and so oftentimes you just don't perceive that dent or scratch is there. So my personal floors with 5 kids now and a big old dog
about your 5th.
are scratch like crazy, and when I clean my floors and they're wet for a minute, it looks horrendous, but then as it dries, a lot of that you don't see nearly as much because it's got such a low sheen like this. So it's not that it's necessarily more durable than a higher sheen, it just does not shine back up to your eye.
So when someone asks me, how do I dog proof my floor? My initial reaction is you can't, but the go-to finish might be this one, because it's about as close to dog proofing a wood floor as you're gonna come, because you don't see the damage that they do. All right, moving on to the third category, for us would be penetrating oils. So rather than a film that sits on top of the wood, this is a finish that penetrates down into the wood, binds with the wood fibers, essentially waterproofs the floor. And there's a lot of cool aspects to this type of finish. The reason why we would direct someone towards this category, there's several reasons. The first would be texture. If somebody wants a texture on their floor, like wire brush or hand scraping texture, or maybe they got a reclaimed lumber floor that already has like the old circle sawn texture from the mill, and it's got a story with it, and you're never going to want to lose it. Well, you're not going to want to sand and finish that floor because you'll lose a lot of that texture. So we recommend penetrating oil in that case. And as you continue to clean and maintain and re-oil a wood floor, theoretically you can maintain it like that forever and never sand it again. So that's one reason. There's also aesthetic reasons. So sometimes people want like a really particular look. In this case, we would call this a cerused look, where we have a backdrop of a black or gray or brown or some color, and then we go back over it with a penetrating oil that highlights the indentions and the grain of the wood with a lighter color than the background. And you can achieve some really cool kind of two-toned or cerused looks with a penetrating oil system. We also had a job recently where somebody just had really large dogs, and they have it has some properties like this category does, where it's really low in sheen, but you can keep some of the oil on hand, and if something happens that damages your floor, you can kind of touch it up with oil. It's a lot easier to touch up that way. It's similar to like conditioning a butcher block with linseed oil. It's how I describe this category, and I love it. It's a great way to maintain wood. The drawback to it, or the reason some people shy away from this, is that they just don't want maintenance. So you are going to have to maintain a floor like this with some maintenance oil or a new oil application every few years. But if you keep up with that maintenance, it can be a great way to keep a floor looking really good for a long period of time.
From there, we're going to go to this real quick, which is one little specialty category that we do occasionally. It's a little bit more of a niche, but this right here is a UV cured finish. So it's a single component water-based finish. So it goes down and applies very similar to these other water-based finishes, and builds up as a coating in a similar way. What makes it unique is that it has photoreactive polymers in it. So after this coating dries, we pass over it with a UV light that causes that finish to cure instantly as it is exposed to the light. So the big upside with that is simply convenience and quick turnaround time. So all types of finishes have a period of curing that they need after they go down before they achieve their full dryness, their full cure and full durability. This finish, once it is cured, has reached that 100%. So, it takes about 4 to 6 hours maybe for that coating to dry tops. Once we pass that light over it, it's 100% cure. So there's no window. The floor is ready to go back into full use right away. So there's some instances where that's a high priority, a quick turnaround time for something. So that's when we would recommend or want to use that finish.
Yeah, and so to put that in perspective, our standard here, we say 3 hours for light foot traffic, 48 hours for furniture, 7 days on pets and rugs, what we recommend. So you have about a 7-day cure period. Same with this category. This one's actually about a 10-day full cure period, so it's a little bit longer. And then this one is 3 hours, we cure it, and then it's fully stressable right away, get pets, rugs, furniture on it as soon as you can bring them in the house.
So Next, we're going to look at a little bit of a custom category that we might get into from time to time. And this is kind of more of like an entire system of what we're trying to do and achieve with the floor. This right here is just an example of some samples we made up for a project where we were trying to match color with two different species that had very different natural colors. Actually, if you look at the back side of that, that's more the natural tones of both those species of wood, very contrasting. And so we were trying to achieve this because for some reason somebody had put both species side by side in a home, which is unfortunately not all that common, where a new installer goes in, doesn't know how to accurately recognize what species is in there, and they just put in what they think it is. So this was also an example we worked on in that same project. So this home had really some existing beautiful 3/4 inch solid wood floors, but part of them was maple, which is a very light, almost white species of wood, and then other parts of the house were American cherry, which starts out kind of a light pinkish and just gets deeper red as it ages. So these samples here, if I'm right, were only done with adding colors on top of them, right?
Yeah.
So one option for doing that is going really dark. When you go really dark, you can tend to get them really close together, but this particular client was not keen on having a really dark floor. They didn't want that, almost to the point where they were considering just ripping out one or the other of the halves of their floor and replacing it completely. So what we ended up doing and finding is a great solution, though, that saved that flooring, was bleaching it. So we bleached, this is actually a full sample of American cherry, and this is showing like the natural color with just sealer on it of that cherry. This strip right here was one coat of that bleach, and then the whole rest of this panel was 2 coats. And these little swatches right here kind of show, after that bleach process was done, just how much lighter that wood got, which is really, really close to kind of the natural color tones of maple. So we then were able to go with the lighter color palette that was much more in line with what they were envisioning. They ended up selecting this middle one here, and it's pretty remarkable actually how those 2 different species in that house really match well and blend together. So
yeah, so this is kind of a catch-all category for custom things we keep in our arsenal depending on what somebody's wanting to achieve. But this would be a water-based stain, which will give you a lot more vibrant kind of uniform color. So there's situations where if a species got a lot of variegated color in it and people don't want that, want more uniform color, we might use a water-based stain. Wood bleach, one of the most common things we get is, can you make my red oak look like white oak? Well, the only way to really do that is to bleach the red oak. So we keep that as a tool in our arsenal. In this case, we bleached American cherry. I have another one coming up where we might end up bleaching hickory, because she doesn't like some of the kind of reddish and yellow hues that can come in hickory. So this would be, you know, specialty color stuff. We also use dyes on occasion for certain reasons. So, you know, all that to say, we keep all those things at our disposal, and we might recommend them for someone for a certain reason.
Yeah, one other thing that came to mind when you were talking about that is we've done a few just color tweak specific jobs. We've actually got one coming up, I think, where somebody purchased a pre-finished floor that just was a natural tone, a little bit like this, but a little bit yellower, and way yellower than what they thought they were picking based on the sample. So rather than replace that floor, what we have done and can do as a solution is add some color into the coatings on top of that to manipulate and tweak the color away from that yellowish tone, more to a pleasing tone toward what they thought they were getting in the beginning. So that's another way we tweak color sometimes. We did that to a whole floor. Sometimes we go in and do a repair on an existing really old floor with an aged finish, we can kind of do it the same to achieve a good uniform color.
Yep. Final category we'll just call solvent based. This is actually a conversion varnish here, but finishes that are film finishes but are not water based, so they might be based in some other solvent. The big drawback to that is long dry times, long cure times, we already mentioned, heavy fumes, but there can be cases where this type of finish is desirable or recommended for one reason or another. One for us would be with a rustic floor where there's a lot of character in it. Sometimes there can be adverse effects of using water base. It could cause the wood to peel or chip or separate at the growth rings on occasion. So to be safe with like a really rustic floor, we might use a solvent-based finish. Color's the other reason. Some people like just the added depth and color. When you finish a floor light with a solvent-based finish, it's going to have a yellowish hue, which is not in line with interior design trends, but some people still like that look. But if you go dark, it can add a richness and a depth to a color that can sometimes be desirable. It also has a heavy build. Most of these finishes have a heavier build than water-based does, so it looks like there's more finish on your floor, even though generally the polymer that's there left behind by a solvent-based finish is softer than water-based.
Yeah, and we don't do these a lot. More and more with environmentally consciousness kind of growing in the world we live in, these are getting kind of less and less, I would say, common. They do achieve a real richness that sometimes you can't achieve with some of these other finishes. But they do have their place and they do have their pros.
Yeah, there sometimes can be more elasticity to that type of a finish too, which we might recommend in certain cases. So again, this is a pretty good representation of the different finishes that we do and why we might recommend them. And like I said, we keep them all as tools in our arsenal for the right situation, and hopefully can learn what someone's trying to achieve and what's most important to them and direct them accordingly.